Hi, this is Pastor Browers from Emmanuel Lutheran Church, and we're going to be studying about Abraham and Sarah today from the book of Genesis. We're going to be going through a whole bunch of different stories, really cool stories. We're starting in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. The Lord had said to Abram, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abram left as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem, at the time the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he went on toward the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Then Abram set out and continued toward the Negev. All right, so I'm just going to stop there for a second. This is the call of Abram. Abram, I guess, hears this voice from God saying, "Leave everything you have and go where I tell you to go." How would you feel if you heard a voice saying, "Leave your house, and take everything you've got and go somewhere"? But it's even a bigger deal. Imagine, some of you are farming families. Imagine that you were told to leave your century farm, and all the land, and just take everything with you. That would be quite an ask. I mean, that would be a lot, to just leave everything that you had worked for and just go somewhere else. And you didn't even know where you were going. Right? People would think you're crazy. What, you're hearing voices now? But this is the promise that God gave to Abram, and Abram believed him, and he left. And he did this. And God says, "I'm going to bless you." But not just like you're going to win the lottery. It's that I'm going to bless you to be a blessing. This is a really important concept for us to remember. It was taught to the Israelites, and it's continued for us as Christians, that we're blessed by God so that we can bless other people. So that means if I get a lot of money, it's not just for me, it's so that I can maybe help other people out when they're in need. Just this kind of an idea, okay? So Abram and Sarai, eventually they're going to change their names to Abraham and Sarah. But at the beginning it starts Abram and Sarai. And they're going to the land of Canaan. What's interesting, though, and what's kind of weird, is that there are already people living there. How would you feel if somebody came to your house and said, "Hi, God told me that this is mine now"? But that is what happened. We're going to learn more about that, but it is kind of an odd thing to have happen. But that's what it says happened in the Bible. So now we're at Genesis 12, verse 10. Now there was a famine in the land. You know what a famine is? A famine is like there's not enough food. Everyone is kind of going hungry. Okay, so there was a famine in the land. And Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was so severe. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, "I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' Then they will kill me, but will let you live. Say that you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you." When Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that she was a very beautiful woman. And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace. He treated Abram well for her sake, and Abram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, men servants and maidservants and camels. But the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife Sarai. So Pharaoh summoned Abram. "What have you done to me?" he said. "Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister so that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go." Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abram to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. So this is a weird story. Abram's going in and is like, "You're so pretty, honey. Say you're my sister so that people treat me nicely." And then, so then his wife gets taken off to be like another person's wife. And then God doesn't like that. So he punishes not Abram, but the guy who took her as his wife, who didn't know any better because he had been lied to. This is just, I think it's important just to notice, though, that Abram is not a perfect person. Okay, you'll notice this in a lot of the heroes of the Bible. They make mistakes, which I kind of think is good news for all of us who also make mistakes. But it's an important thing to notice. All right, we're going to continue Genesis chapter 15. Chapter 15. All right, starting at verse 1. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. "Do not be afraid, Abram. I will be your shield, your very great reward." But Abram said, "O sovereign Lord, what can you give me, since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus." Just a moment while we'll start again in a sec, but why is this such a big deal? Well, because in chapter 12, God said, I'm gonna give you descendants. But do you remember how old Abram was in chapter 12? You can go back and look if you want. 75 years old. Now, guys have trouble making babies when they're that old. The older you get, the harder it is to make a baby. It's especially hard to have a baby if you're a woman and you're really old. And Sarai is about 10 years younger than him, but that makes her 65. People just don't have babies at that age, okay? So God's like, how can I have descendants if my heir, the person that I'm going to leave all my stuff to, is this guy, Eliezer of Damascus? Maybe it says down here who that is. But it's one of his male servants, probably that kind of an idea. So that's the problem. He doesn't have a baby, and he's just getting older. So here we go, verse 3. Genesis 15, verse 3. "And Abram said, 'You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir.' Then the word of the Lord came to him, 'This man will not be your heir, but a son coming from your own body will be your heir.' He took him outside and said, 'Look up at the heavens and count the stars, if indeed you can count them.' Then he said to him, 'So shall your offspring be.' Abram believed the Lord, and God credited it to Abram as righteousness." We're going to stop there because that is a really big deal verse. We're going to hear about that a long time from now in Romans chapter 4. But Abram believed God. Even though Abram was really, really old and it was impossible for him and his wife to have a baby, God said he was going to have a baby, and Abram believed him. And it was through that faith that God said, "You are right in my eyes." Like, it's through that faith that God said, "You are righteous. I'm not upset at you. I think you're awesome." That's one way of looking at it. But this is important for all of us who put our faith and our trust in Jesus. Jesus says things like, "You're forgiven. I love you, even though you make all these mistakes." We say, "Okay, I believe you." And God says, "Then you are righteous." Just like with Abram. Abram is the father of all of us who have faith in Jesus. Because of this verse, verse 6, Abram believed the Lord, and God credited it to him as righteousness. All right. He also said to him, "I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it." But Abram said, "O sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it?" So the Lord said to him, "Bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon." Abram brought all these to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, "Know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your fathers in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the 4th generation your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure." When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking firepot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the cut pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Kadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites. Sorry, it's one of my special skills as a pastor to be able to say all those names. Weird words, huh? Anyway, this is an important story. It's about a covenant. You remember what covenant meant from maybe the last video? It means a promise. A covenant means a promise. God is going to make a promise to Abram. Abram says, how do I know for sure you're going to keep your word? God says, I'll make you a promise. And so what does Abram have to do? It says he has to cut up these animals. Okay, cut them in half. Except for the birds, he doesn't cut them in half. And he sets them on both sides. Okay, what is going on here? Well, the deal was that what they were going to do is he was going to walk through these animals. Okay, and the deal was if Abram would break the promise he was making, let what happened to these animals be done to them. Okay, whoever's making the promise is saying, if I break my promise, you might as well cut me in half, just like these dead animals here. That's the symbolism of it, okay? But what happens next is really interesting. Abram falls asleep. God puts him to sleep. So Abram is asleep. So who makes the promise? Well, it says that God, he shows up as a smoking fire pot with a blazing torch, and that is what passes through the animals, the pieces, okay? So Abram actually doesn't make the promise, the covenant. God does. So what God is saying to Abram essentially is, if I don't give you descendants, if I don't give you this land I've promised you, you can cut me in half like any of these animals. God is the one making the promise. God is the one keeping the covenant. It's really important that we notice this, because we are, when we do things like become baptized, or when we go to church and we say, I'm going to follow you, God, and then we screw up, right? Then we mess up. Then we're in trouble, right? But the thing is, with our relationship with God, God knows we're going to mess up. It's God who's really responsible to keep the promise. That is what is so interesting. It's something I had to skip earlier on, but the story of Noah and the ark. Do you remember some of you know the story. It says at the end, after Noah got off the ark and God promised, I'm never going to destroy the earth again like this with a flood. He said, I'm going to set a bow in the clouds, and it will be a sign of the covenant, the promise between me and the earth. When I see that bow in the clouds, I'll remember my covenant, that I'm not going to destroy everything. Do you know what a bow is? It's like a rainbow, okay? But think about this for a moment. Think about a bow. If it's a bow, like a bow and arrow, and it's going like this, okay? So where does the arrow go? Think about a bow and arrow. It's going up. It's aiming up. See that? The point is, if God breaks his promise to Noah, where does the arrow go? Shoots God in the heart, right? It's shooting out. God is the one responsible to keep his promise. If he doesn't keep his promise, the bow would shoot him. It's the same idea here. If God breaks his promise, then he's the one cut in pieces, okay? God is always the one that says he's going to keep his promises. It's pretty important for us to know that, because that means no matter how many times we might mess up, we can ask for forgiveness and he'll forgive us. And we can trust him because he never breaks his promises. All right, we're going to learn about a guy named Ishmael now, and about the importance of patience and what can happen if you're impatient. So chapter 16 is where we're going to start. Verse 1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. So she said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Now, wait a minute. That's not supposed to be how this works. God said, Abram and Sarah, you're going to have a baby. But Sarai was impatient. So she's like, I have a slave, sleep with her, and then her kid will become my baby. Very odd. what's even more odd, I think, is that it says in that very next verse, at the end of verse 2, Abram agreed. Okay, Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So, after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarah, his wife, took her Egyptian maidservant Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar and she conceived. By the way, is this okay? Well, in the Old Testament it appears so. But remember Adam and Eve, they were just for each other. In the New Testament, we don't have any of this. We said a man, one woman, one man, right? That's it. But for some reason, this seemed to be appropriate back then. So anyway, it says, when she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. When Hagar realized she was pregnant, she was like, ha ha ha, I can get pregnant and you can't. So she was treating Sarai badly. Verse 5. Then Sarai said to Abram, you are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows she's pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Yeah, who's he going to judge? Who is doing the better thing here? It's hard to know, right? Verse 6. Your servant is in your hands, Abram said. Do with her whatever you think best. Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress Sarai, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will increase your descendants so that they will be too numerous to count. The angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now with a child, and you will have a son. You shall name him Ishmael. For the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her, you are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. That is why the well, she was called Beer Lahai Roi. That it is still there between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. All right, so Ishmael comes back to live with Abram and Sarai and all that, but it's really Hagar's son. God keeps track of this, okay? But who is Ishmael? Well, have you ever heard of the Muslims? We got Christians, we got Jews, we got Muslims, okay? Muslims follow the religion of Islam, okay? Like, think of the Middle East. That's what I'm talking about. The Muslims would track their descendants to Ishmael, okay? Pretty soon we're going to learn about where Jews and then Christians track their descendants to. But God blesses Hagar to have Ishmael and have lots of descendants. But see, from that point on, Christians, Jews, Muslims, they've been fighting. Like in the Middle East, they're always having a war out there, okay? And it all tracks back to this. Because Abram wasn't patient, Sarai wasn't patient for God's promise. And this eventually it leads to constant fighting and fighting and fighting. It's just interesting that that's where it comes from. But still, God protects Ishmael. And yet there's still a promise that we're waiting on. So that's what's going to happen next. Well, not quite next. Chapter 17. We're going to learn about something I always have such a joy teaching in confirmation. Chapter 17, verse 1. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless. I will confirm my covenant between me and you and will greatly increase your numbers. Abram fell face down, and God said to him, As for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham, for I have made you the father of many nations. I will make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. I will establish my covenant and an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for the generations to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. The whole land of Canaan, where you are now an alien, I will give you as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and I will be their God. Then God said to Abraham, As for you, you must keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you for the generations to come. This is my covenant with you and your descendants after you, the covenant you are to keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You are to undergo circumcision, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and you. For the generations to come, every male among you who is 8 days old must be circumcised, including those born in your household, or bought with money from a foreigner, or those who are not your offspring. Whether born in your household or bought with your money, they must be circumcised. My covenant in your flesh is to be an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who has not been circumcised in the flesh will be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. So, do you know what circumcision is? You might not. So that's why I'm going to quickly explain it. Most of the boys probably know what it is. Remember how it said it's only for the males? But the girls might not. It's usually some 7th grade girl who doesn't know what circumcision is that makes me have to explain this. It's on a guy, on his penis, there is foreskin, and it gets cut off. Not the penis itself, just the foreskin. I know, it's embarrassing, and I'm glad that nobody is standing in front of me giggling. But this is what it is. That's circumcision. The men, every male 8 days or older, and including the 99-year-old Abram and all his servants, were going to have to be circumcised. Why? Well, God says it's a sign of the covenant between me and you. It's a sign to say, hey, God promised me something, and I am his follower. There are lots of questions I have about this. First of all, how did you prove that, It's like, are you really a Jew? Are you really one of God's chosen people? And then it's like, well, just a second. Then they show off. I don't know. It's very odd. Why didn't the girls have to? Well, because there really wasn't anything to cut off, right? So the girls didn't. So that's interesting, right? But it's very weird. It's a very weird thing. But this is a big deal. We're going to be still talking about circumcision in the New Testament, okay? It was a big deal that every one of God's chosen people had to have this sign, or else they were going to be cut out of the promise. So we're going to just keep on going. Everyone was circumcised, just like God said to do. We're going to continue on with Genesis 18. We're going to start at verse 16. I'm skipping over some really cool stories, but I only have so much time. Verse 16 of Genesis 18. When the men got up to leave, they looked down towards Sodom, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. Then the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him, so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is just and right, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him." Then the Lord said, "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know." The men turned away and went toward Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Then Abraham approached him and said, "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in that city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will not the judge of all the earth do right?" The Lord said, "If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Verse 27. Then Abraham spoke up again, "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes, what if the number of the righteous is 5 less than 50? Will you destroy the whole city because of 5 people? If I find 45 there," he said, "I will not destroy it." Once again he spoke to him, "What if 40 are found there?" Anyway, this story goes on and on. What if 40? What if 35? 30? 35? And then one more time, it says in verse 32 at the end, "For the sake of 10, will you destroy it?" Right? "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." So Abraham he's praying. He's talking to God. He's like, are you going to destroy this city, Sodom and Gomorrah, for, 50 mean people, wicked people, evil people? And he whittles them down to 10. Why does this matter? Well, first of all, it's interesting that God can change his mind. It's also interesting that God changes his mind by Abraham talking to him. What does that say to us? Well, haven't you ever seen something coming down the pike that you say, I don't want that to happen? What do? Maybe you pray. Maybe you talk to God and say, God, can we do it a little different? What about this? Giving God some alternatives. Because God can change his mind, it appears. This is important to remember to pray for anything that you desire, because God listens. Okay? So now let's find out about Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah, this story is like the epitome of evilness, okay, in the Bible. The Bible refers to Sodom and Gomorrah as like this example of so bad, okay, that this is a really, really bad dude. I mean, like when we talk in our day and age, who do we talk about as such a really, really bad dude? Like Hitler, you know? When you say you're acting like Hitler, you know, you're saying you're acting like the horrible, horrible person. Or, you know, Osama bin Laden. There's another horrible, horrible person that we think about, right? That's like Sodom and Gomorrah, just really bad. So what was so bad about them? Why does God want to destroy them? Why did Abraham pray that they would be protected? Chapter 19. The two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up and met them and bowed down with his face to the ground. "My lords," he said, "please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night and then go on your way early in the morning." "No," they answered, "we will spend the night in the square." But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them." Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him and said, "No, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look." First, we're going to stop for a sec. Verse 7. So, this is one of the scriptures. There are 6 main scriptures in the Bible that talk about homosexuality or this issue, okay? Because this was one of the big reasons why Sodom got in trouble. Not the only reason, by the way, but one of them, okay? It says that all the men wanted to come and have sex with these visitors to Lot's house, okay? So that, in the Bible, it talks about homosexual behavior as being a sin, okay? Now, I want to just stop here for a second because I think this is really important. Because some Christians, I think, aren't very good about this. The Bible never says that we should hate people, okay? If somebody is different than you or has different temptations than you have, you aren't called to hate them, okay? You might have seen signs that Christians hold, like God hates certain people, like homosexual. God doesn't hate people, okay? And remember, this is saying it's a sin, no different than somebody who has sex before they're married, or no different between someone who gets divorced, like my parents, or somebody who talks back to their parents. We'll find out more about that in Exodus 20, when it says to honor your father and mother in the 10 Commandments. The thing is, the Bible says it's a sin, but it doesn't say that we should treat people badly because of sins. We're supposed to love them, right? But, at church, in this Lutheran church, we still teach that, yes, God says it's a sin. But, of course, as Christians, we're called to love sinners because we're sinners ourselves, okay? I just thought that it was important to stop there for a second and just talk about this. Of course, you might still have questions about this. I understand. But I'm going to continue on, all right? So we're at verse 6. I'm going to start there again. 19:6 of Genesis. Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him and said, "No, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof." "Get out of our way," they replied, and they said, "This fellow came here as an alien. Now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them." They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. But the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Then they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness, so that they could not find the door. This is such an awful story, right? What does Lot do? Because they want to have sex with his male visitors. He says, "I have 2 daughters. Here, let me send them out so you can rape them." How horrible, right? I mean, that's a sin as well, right? Why does he do this? I I don't have good answers, okay? All I can tell you is what I know. What this is making it look like is that for them to rape his daughters was somehow better than for them to rape his male visitors, okay? It still seems pretty horrible, but somehow one is a less bad than the other. That's all I can say. I don't know more, other than it doesn't actually happen. Because these visitors, these angels, save them, right? So then at verse 12, it says, the two men said to Lot, do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against its people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it. So anyway, he ends up taking a wife and 2 daughters. I'm just going to jump ahead. In verse 16, when he hesitated, the men grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and his 2 daughters and led them safely out of the city as the Lord was merciful to them. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, flee for your lives, don't look back, and don't stop anywhere on the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away. But Lot said to them, no, my lords, your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me in sparing my life. But I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me, and I'll die. Anyway, they stop there for a little while. What ends up happening, I'm not sure exactly which verse it is. His wife turns around, Lot's wife turns around, even though she was told not to, and she becomes a pillar of salt. Very odd. She disobeyed and something bad happened to her. Anyway, it's an odd story, but it's an important story that you know. That's Sodom and Gomorrah. So again, this video was full of a lot of stories that were kind of hard to understand, weren't they? I mean, you've got Abram saying, oh, my wife is my sister. And then, the person treats her like his wife, and then that guy gets in trouble, even though it's Abram's fault. And then we got Abram and Sarai being promised a child, but Sarai gets impatient, and then they have Ishmael, who eventually leads to this constant conflict between Jews and Muslims for the rest of eternity. Then you got Abram being told to circumcise himself and all of the guys for some reason, right? I mean, and then you've got Sodom and Gomorrah, which is a story all about this sinful city that Abraham prays that they might be saved, but in the end, very few from that city are saved. And you have this example of talking about homosexual behavior, talking about raping these 2 women as somehow that would be a better alternative, even though we know that that's still horrible. The Bible is full of a lot of stories that are really hard to understand from our perspective. I just think it's important that you know them. I don't necessarily have a great answer for them all to make them seem like they're not so awful, but I think it's important that you hear them. I mean, you can make your own opinions about these things, of course, but that's along the way, we're going to learn more and more, and hopefully you'll understand more and more about why we trust God, even with very odd things that happen in our lives as well.